Okay, so welcome back to now chapter 4. So I'm 24 years of age. I'm still working at the Manly Hotel. I'd rented a 3-acre property at Chandler, and this particular night I was driving home from work at the Manly Hotel. I had to go through Capalaba to pick my daughter up because she was being looked after by one of my friends. And as I drove through Capalaba, there was like an island in the middle, like it was many years ago, so it's not like it is today. I seen this body of a man laying on the island, but with his part of his legs and feet still on the road. So I sort of had a feeling who it was, and yes, it was him. His name was Bobby, a beautiful old man. So I went over to the Capalaba Tavern and I said, "Oh look, Bobby's passed out or could be hurt. Can somebody go and pick him up, please? I can't do it." So they did, and yes, it was Bobby, and they got him home safely that night. So the next morning on my way to work, I decided to make a detour to go and check to see if Bobby was okay. So I stopped at a Capalaba Tavern and asked around as, how was he? Is he all right? And they said, yeah, he's fine, he's in the bar. So I went in and said hello to him, and he asked where I was living, and I told him I'd rented 3 acres up the road and that everything was all right. And he said to me, he said, "Do you have room for me in a caravan there? I've been kicked out of where I am." And I went, "Oh, yeah, sure, Bobby. Not a problem. Just come on up." So I gave him the address, not thinking that he really was coming. I thought it was just all, talk kind of thing. But it wasn't. Not that night when I got home from work, but the next day when I got home from work, here was Bobby's caravan and Bobby saying, "I'm here." And he stayed with me for many years, and I was very grateful for that. He was a great help to me. So Bobby stayed with me for many years, which was great. He used to look after my daughter for me, and I trusted him to no end with my daughter. He was absolutely brilliant. We had an agreement, but that on his pension day and the day after, he had no responsibilities because he'd get his pension and he'd go to the pub and he'd drink it and gamble and whatever he did. Wasn't his keeper. But also in between one fortnight to the other, every now and again he'd run out of money and he'd have to lend money off me. Might have been for a packet of smokes or a little bit extra food. I never paid for his alcohol. He never asked me to pay for alcohol. But as soon as he'd get his pension check, he'd cash it. He'd come and find me wherever I was, whether I was at home or at work or whatever. He would give me his rent money instantly and anything that he owed me. And then he would go to the pub and he would spend the rest of it on whatever he did. But he was a beautiful man. He followed me when I moved off the property. He came with me. He stayed with me for quite a few years, a couple of years until I moved back out into the country. But he got cancer and he had to stay in town. But I do think of him regularly. He was like an angel, somebody who helped me along the way. Okay, so I've got Bobby living with me in this caravan. He did spend a lot of time in the house with me. We looked after each other, but there was a 3-bedroom house, 1 bathroom, a big bungalow out the back, and of course horse stables and dressage arena and all that kind of stuff. It was a horse property, but there was this guy that I knew at the tavern that I just had to happened to run into one day, and he told me he was getting kicked out of his house and he had 2 teenage daughters, young teenagers, and he had nowhere to go. And I said, "Oh look, you can come and live at my place if you need to. I always get the stragglers. You can live in the bungalow. The 2 girls can live in the house with me." Of course, I had to be the mother for these 2 girls once again. And then he said, "Oh, I've got 2 mates that live with me. I'd really like them to come too." And I went, "Oh, okay. You 3 boys can live in the bungalow, the 2 girls inside. Happy days." So they all moved in. And one of them ended up becoming my first husband. So while I was on this property, not only did I rescue all the people that needed somewhere to live, I decided to rescue horses. I would find cheap horses in the paper that kids have grown out of, or they never wanted, or it was thin, or just horses. And I would buy them, I would bring them home, I would feed them up, ride them, and then I'd sell on. I made pretty good money out of it. It was sort of like a passion of mine. At least the horses get a new lease on life and someone else who's going to love them and care for them. Well, in the process, there was this trainer who had this thoroughbred 2-year-old colt, and he needed somewhere for it to go and to work it, because I ended up leasing 30 acres up the back, and which had a racetrack around it. No fencing, just a track. So I said, it's going to be a bit hard. But anyway, it was hard with mares being around all the time and this young colt. But anyway, I managed. He stayed there for a while until he ended up going off racing. But I did lose contact of him for a little while, where he ended up. But that's coming up, because I did find him later on. Okay, so I've got me in one bedroom, these 2 teenage girls in another bedroom, my daughter in her bedroom, Bobby in the caravan, 3 men in the bungalow. And I've got horses coming and going, I'm riding, I'm trying to go to work. But anyway, I got my daughter this little pony, Camille was her name. She was a beautiful little pony. And my daughter didn't have a saddle at the time. And she wanted to ride him. There was a little bit of a climb up to the back fence, and it came down into a little bit of a slope. And there was a little creek just at the bottom of the paddock. Only had about a foot of water in. But my daughter goes up the back and she comes trotting down, and my daughter always rode really forward. She still doesn't ride that far forward, but I was always telling her to sit back. And she's coming trotting down this thing, and I'm saying, sit back, because I could see what was going to happen. Anyway, the pony stopped at this little creek going through the property, and my daughter went straight over top of her head, landed in the water, and I'm rolling around on the ground laughing at her. And she stood up and put her hands on her hips and said, "That's not funny, Mummy, I got to really hurt." I just couldn't say a thing. It was so funny. Oh, I'm a terrible mother. Yes, so one of these 3 guys that lived in the bungalow did become my first husband. We got on really well. He had horses. He was good to my daughter. He had a son of his own that was a little bit older than my daughter. Didn't live with us, but he used to come and visit on the weekends. So it was good. We did have a bit of a disagreement over something. I don't remember what it was. But anyway, I ended up packing a few things and getting out of the house for a few days with my daughter, because I didn't want to kick him out on the street. I didn't want to put anybody else out. No, the girls were there, everything was there. So anyway, I moved out. I was gone for a couple of days, and he knew where I was, so he'd keep contacting me. And after a couple of days, I went back there, and we sort of sorted it out. And then he asked me to marry him, and I said no, and I didn't want to get married at that stage. But then under pressure from my friends and family and whatever, "Oh, you're getting older, Loretta, he's really good with your daughter, he loves you." So eventually I said yes. So I married him. There was a bit of a difference of opinion or something with the 2 guys that were left in the bungalow, because my partner was now living in the house with me, and it couldn't be resolved. So the one with the 2 young girls, he moved out, in which then I only left one of them in the bungalow, and of course my partner, fiance, and my daughter and Bobby there also. So now we're planning for a wedding. All good. But prior to us getting married, he had no driver's license. He was under disqualification. and he'd been for a while, I can't remember, but we were together for a while, so it must have been a fair disqualification. But he had 1 day left before he got his licence back. And I was at work, and one of the other guys in the bungalow wanted to take my soon-to-be husband's ute, and he didn't want him to take it. So my soon-to-be husband drove this guy to where he wanted, dropped him off, and then took the ute back home because he wanted to work on it. Well, he got pulled over by the police. Mandatory jail sentence, driving under disqualification. I was fuming. 1 day left, and he could have had his licence back. But then he went to jail for 3 months, absolutely destroyed me the day that they sentenced him. But I had to put up with it. I used to go and visit him on the weekends because he ended up going to Woodford Jail, and had to wait out my 3 months for him to come back home. While my soon-to-be husband was in jail, and the other guy, the one guy that was left in the bungalow, he was really good. We got on really well. He had a horse also. We were up the back paddock one day around the racetrack, and we were just walking along, and he said, "I'll give you a race." And I was on an old pacer, and a pacer has a different stride to a gallop. So anyway, I said, "Righto, let's go." So we took off, and I got this horse in a flat-out gallop, and then all of a sudden he broke stride, and he jarred my back that bad that I had to get off and walk home. And I suffered with that for a long time. But also, he was off doing something one day, and I was walking through the back paddock, and I found these 3 marijuana plants, and I was not happy. I knew they were his because he used to walk up there all the time. So I pulled them out and I destroyed them. I thought, I'm not having these on my property. I got young kids coming and going. He was not happy. Anyway, we had a huge disagreement, and I ended up telling him that he had to move. I wasn't going to tolerate that. Okay, so the 3 months has passed. My fiance has now come out of jail. Life begins again. He did go back to work in the same position that he was in before he went to jail. His boss was very good, kept his job open, but he was a very good worker and very reliable. But in the meantime, my uncle had a sandblasting business over on Stradbroke Island, and he needed staff. So my mother suggested that he goes over there to work more money, which was good for both of us. So he would go over to the island through the week and then come home on the weekends. While he was living and working over on the island for my uncle, he was living in a room with my cousin. They became very close, and that cousin of mine ended up being the best man at our wedding. And I thought was really good, them working over there together, that, you know, they would look after each other. Yeah, they did, but they forgot about me. How wrong I was that it was going to be a good thing. But that'll come out soon.